Hello everyone, this is Alistair Lewis here. We are having more and more people join the session, which is really great. So we're just going to hang on for a minute, maybe 2 minutes, just while we get a few more people here, and then we will begin. Okay, I think we're going to get going. So, hello everyone, my name's Alistair Lewis, so I run the UK BIM Alliance South group with Keith Deeney. Welcome to this event. We're delighted so many of you could join us. We've had a really great response to this event. We've had nearly 500 people register, which is a really fantastic response. So we're delighted so many people can be here. This session is going to be about the new BIM standard, ISO 19650. It's an introduction to that, and I think it's a really exciting development in the industry for the UK. We are really lucky to have two kind of key speaking groups talking today. So we've got the BIM Alliance talking about the work that they're doing, and also we've got BSI talking about the ISO standard. We'll have two speakers from them today. We're hoping the event should be around an hour and a quarter, maybe an hour and a half. It depends on the amount of questions we get at the end, but we've booked out a couple of hours just in case we do have a lot of questions. I'd just like to say that the event has been supported by the BSI and the BIM Alliance, and I wanted to thank both of them for all of the help in organising this and for having giving the time to speak today. It's been really great, and the response has been really encouraging. If you would like to share your thoughts on social media, I'm just going to move this forward one slide. We have got all of the hashtags and the handles for those organisations. So please use those and get involved with the conversation. In terms of the agenda today, so we're just going to do a quick welcome and introduction on behalf of the BIM Alliance South group. My colleague Keith will be doing that. We're going to have Andy Bootle talking about the UK BIM Alliance and also an introduction to the BIM Framework. And then we're going to have BSI, so Gary Patterson and Rob Hine speaking about ISO 19650. We will then have a Q&A session at the end, so you'll be able to ask questions within the webinar on the side, I think. Due to the format, what we're going to do is save those questions until the end, so you can, if you can make those questions as clear as possible in what they're related to, that will help the presenters to be able to answer those. Yeah, hopefully get as much information back to you. I will hand over to my co-chair Keith Deeney now so that he can go through the BIM Alliance South group and the presentations will follow that. So again, thank you very much for attending, and I'll hand over to Keith.
Thanks, Alistair. Well, firstly, just like to repeat, obviously, thank you very much for joining us. And obviously, yeah, massively appreciate the support of the BIM Alliance and the BSI. And obviously very looking forward to the presentation of BSI and obviously the industry. I think is really looking to the UK for how it's moving the ISOs on. So yeah, that should be a really good presentation. I'm a relative newcomer to the BIM region South. Alistair used to run it with Mike Turpin beforehand. I've been with it for a few years now. In recent years, we've been trying to run about sort of 2 events a year. Most recently, we're trying to collaborate. Our last collaboration with the Construction Excellence went really quite well. We're obviously now trying to move those with the recent events online, obviously with this one, and attendance being so good today, then obviously that's a really good sign. The next one we're looking at doing fairly promptly, and we're looking to do a collaboration with, well, we're going to be joined with Femi from Portsmouth City Council, who's looking at potentially taking us through his experience there and some of the case studies that he's going through, and also sort of continue to collaborate with Construction Excellence with the support obviously of the UK BIM Alliance. So I think the next thing really is to hand over to Andy, who's Andy Butchell, obviously head of the BIM UK here, which I'm sure some of you already know, and he's going to take us through the UK BIM Alliance.
Thank you, Keith, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So let me just move this on. Yep, so Andy Bootle, engagement co-lead for the UK BIM Alliance, along with Pam, who's been organising the webinar session in the background. Thank you, Pam. And the day job is head of BIM at Kier. So I'm just going to give you a bit of an update on the UK BIM Alliance, so recent activities, progress, and then touch on the UK BIM Framework before we move forward to BSI, who will get into a bit more detail about ISO 19650. So firstly, and again, before we get into anything, I reckon you ask 10 different practitioners to sum up BIM in a sentence and you'll get 10 different answers. We quite like this slide, again, trying to keep the messaging simple. So it's very simplest. BIM is a process of defining, creating and delivering structured data and documents, and fundamentally making the right information available to the right person or people at the right time, and for the life cycle of built environment assets. Nice simple definition that often gets people tongue-tied, including myself. So in terms of the UK BIM Alliance, probably I'm assuming everyone on the call will have heard of the Alliance. If you don't know why we exist, we were set up, put together post the 2016 government mandate, when that came into an industry level, really coordinate, lead and support industry to drive BIM to a business as usual state. So that's why we exist. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about how the Alliance operates.
Sorry,
so really,
Andy, sorry, apologies.
Yep.
We've just had a couple of people comment about the sound. Could anybody please put in the chat window or in the questions tab, are you hearing the speakers?
Okay.
Because a couple of people are having, no, okay, so it's fine, carry on. Yeah, I've had a lot of people saying they're good. Thanks, Andy.
Excellent. Thanks, Pam, no problem. So you know, why BIM to business as usual? Why do we need to get there? Well, fundamentally, this journey we're on to digital transformation, I think it's widely recognised that BIM forms the absolute essential foundations of that, and as it matures, you know, with anything else that comes along. So we have to get that right as an industry before we can really leverage and move on or move forward. So the Alliance, we like to think that we're trusted independent leadership. We're made, the people involved, many on the call today and elsewhere are, you know, we're people from industry, we don't have a commercial agenda, we're from all walks of different backgrounds and roles. So there's a real balance of understanding and direction. We're absolutely about mobilising the community. Talk a bit more about that shortly. And really enabling practical implementation. So you know, we have to have the standards to form our working practices and processes around, but you know, doing that practically is what the Alliance is about, and helping us to get to a consistent level of implementation. And probably the most important thing for me is a common understanding and one voice. So we're very much about not creating another silo to sit in with industry. We work across industry, across institutions, organisations to try and get that commonality. So just probably 10 quick things to know about the UK BIM Alliance. So I think I've touched on this. So it is you, the fact that you're on this call, if you're operating in any sort of space that touches on BIM, digital, this is about you. It's for you. You can get involved. So one of the things the Alliance does is commission projects. And when I say projects, we have a way where people can suggest ideas for whether it's a report that's needed, some training to, whatever it is. There's often gaps identified that need filling. Wouldn't it be nice if we had this? So there's a way that the Alliance can, we've got a mechanism where we can commission projects. They're managed by the exec team and our implementation leads, along with those who want to get involved. Again, we'll touch a bit more on that shortly. It is an open door. I think sometimes it's still seen as a bit of an exclusive club. We're absolutely not about that. We want people to get involved. We need people to get involved. We're all volunteers. So if it's something you think you could help with or bring some skill to, absolutely we'll welcome that with open arms. We are a non-for-profit organisation and we don't draw on any funding from government, but we do need to operate as an organisation. So we generate income by very kindly sponsored patrons that sponsor us annually. And again, I'll touch on that shortly. And we're here to promote BIM to business as usual. So there's a regional hub near you, and you will know this seeing as you're on this call, because this is UK BIM Alliance South region. Our community groups are across the country, UK wide. So there's always one for you to join. And there's also BIM 4 groups, so the special interest groups for specific sectors or purposes. Look out for our ambassadors. We have a number of ambassadors that are spreading the messaging for us and penetrating key events and different organisations. Again, I'll touch on that shortly. And like I said, we're very much about connecting with others. So one of our key activities at the moment is leaning in with BSI actually and CDBB to produce guidance against ISO 19650. So I'm going to touch on that again a bit later, but do reference it, use it, and feedback, and get involved if you can, or just give us some feedback. Okay. So in terms of what the organisation looks like, and again, I don't want to labour too long on this, but we have an exec committee. Probably the two operational arms of the Alliance are implementation there and engagement. Building Smart UK and Ireland chapter, they are actually part of the UK BIM Alliance as well. All comes under one umbrella. Our operations team, who obviously back of house stuff, keep us ticking over, and we also have a technology group which is made up of a number of vendors, and again I'll touch on that shortly. So that they're the kind of the key strands or arms of the Alliance. We do have, sorry, I'm just clicking on here, there we go, it's just a bit slow. So there's a layer of governance around that. So we have non-exec directors and a strategic advisory group, and Syria are our legal entity who sort of handle the finances and things like that to keep us honest. And our community groups, of which UK BIM Alliance South are one of many, is really how we reach out into the built environment and connect with industry. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, we have patronage, so effectively people who sponsor the Alliance. We have different grades of patronage. Our platinum patrons, you can see, are there. So some pretty big names, and really pleasing for us was a fairly recent, well, HS2 is the most recent, I think, but BEIS coming on board is a real signal from government that although we're not actually drawing any direct funding, BEIS are, recognise the importance of the work going on and thoroughly support it. So came on as one of our platinum patrons. And the rest of our patrons, let's flick up here, you will see. and we're always looking for more. We need to fund more activities. So if anyone on the call thinks their company organisation would like to become a patron, then please do reach out to us. We'd love to see. You can see there's a lot of technology vendors there, which is fantastic, and thanks to them. But we'd love to see some more contractors and supply chain businesses coming on board if we can. So on to communities. So as we mentioned, there's a nice simplified map of our BIM Alliance regions now. Like I said, previously known as under the CIC as BIM regions, we've now connected into the BIM Alliance. So again, one voice, a coordinated message. That's how we look across the country, and they're very much there to support and engage with industry at a regional level. Which we are doing today, which is really good. We've recently reinvigorated a leadership team to help coordinate all the communities, because you'll see shortly that we've got a number of regions there, regional, but then when we move across to BIM 4 groups, so the specialist groups, and there's pretty much a BIM for anything you can imagine, there's a lot of coordination and alignment to do there across all of these groups, and we want them to operate really slickly together. Alistair mentioned earlier that there's a collaboration there naturally with constructing excellence, which is really good. So we're about to really start working much closer together with constructing excellence at a regional level, shared objectives and goals and support. So that's really encouraging. Just moving on, so ambassadors. So there's our lovely, our current list of ambassadors. There's one more, David Churcher, that needs to be added to that. It literally, I think David came on board a couple of days ago, so it's hot off the press. So our ambassadors are people with quite high profile in industry, respected for driving the agenda in whatever organisation and role they are in this space. And they go around the country talking at events for us, and helping again connect people into the Alliance where necessary, in the guidance and other initiatives. So thanks to our ambassadors, they're doing a really good job at the moment. Another initiative that we've really been driving hard this year is the affiliate program. So again, industry reach is the important thing for us. We're still in a little bit of a bubble in the BIM and digital space. The communities do a fantastic job at the regions and BIM 4s, but that's very much the audience is people that are currently interested and want to come to the party and learn and share knowledge. Our challenge is to try and get that messaging far wider to those that necessarily don't understand, get it, want to. So we thought the way to reach a much wider audience there is to partnership with some of the professional institutions and trade associations that you see there. So we kicked off with a briefing in February, and all of the logos you can see on the slide, we had people attend from those organisations and had a really good discussion and some really positive feedback from them for an affiliation to work together. We just in the team behind that are just trying to actually convert those affiliations to not a contractual relationship, but a formal agreement of what that means for us and them. We've just had the IET actually formalise that, and we've got a number of others on there that we're just working through the final steps to then really have that wider reach, be able to push messaging out to those memberships via those institutions and have them lean back into some of the initiatives going on with us. So really positive stuff going on there. Incidentally, if you're anyone listening from any of those organisations and think you could potentially help with that, again, please do get in touch. Okay, so the technology group. So a lot of well, in fact, I think pretty much all of the organisations there, the vendors involved with that, are also a patron. And the purpose of the technology group is, again, to try and get a common discussion and objective going between all the different software vendors. I think the hot topic at the moment is common data environment solutions. As you see, many of those on there provide solutions that aim to fulfill part of the common data environment. So, in terms of the interoperability between those systems and trying to make information exchange between platforms far more automated and slick. So there's some really good stuff coming out of that group at the moment. So my click didn't work then. What's going on? Okay, there we go. So implementation, which is the other, so effectively the arm that looks after the projects we commission. There's numerous projects that previously commissioned that are available on the website, such as reports and resources. The current ones, like so, probably our main focus and effort at the moment is the guidance to 19650, which I'll come on to a little bit shortly. Massive project going on there. There's also a BIM maturity and benefits measurement project ongoing, upskilling and digital competence, and we're working with BIM for Housing Association on some initiatives with them. Poor Sarah Davison leads the implementation side. It's not, we have co-leads to trying to manage the amount of work we're doing. Sarah's been on her own, to be fair, for at least 6 months. We're really happy. We've just had another 2 co-leads come on board to support Sarah, and hopefully we'll be able to widen the scope of how many projects we can start delivering with industry at any one time. So really good news there. Okay, so that's a bit of a flying update on the UK BIM Alliance. Now just onto the UK BIM Framework. So I suppose, what is it? So UK BIM Framework, you can see there's 3 organisations on there: BSI, who we've got today, us, UK BIM Alliance, and Centre for Digital Built Britain. It's a co-ownership of this framework. It is an alliance, and the framework now exists and replaces what we previously knew as BIM Level 2. So think of BIM Level 2 morphing now into a framework approach. So some of you probably will be thinking, well, why do that? Why change things when, the last few years we've been getting used to BIM levels? I think there's kind of 3 main reasons behind this change. So the levels, BIM Level 2, the BIM levels of maturity really did serve a good purpose for a number of years, allowed industry to try and focus and drive that forward. But I think in recent years it started to become a little bit counterproductive, and certainly there were so many arguments about what the definition of BIM Level 2 was, because obviously standards mature and there were more of the 1192 suite being launched as we went on. So trying to define BIM Level 2 as a thing legally was impossible. So that was one reason. There was also laziness in terms of procurement, I think. So many of you would have had a tender come over the fence at you saying BIM Level 2 please, supply chain, which completely goes against the intention of what BIM Level 2 was trying to do. But because it was a thing that people could latch onto, it was used to procure. So a framework approach could help mitigate that happening, we thought, or it was thought. And then finally, as BSI are going to come on to shortly, we've got the emerging ISO 19650 series that is slowly replacing the UK 1192 suite for us. So it's not a static thing. So a framework approach allows us to move forward consistently, but it's not a static thing. It can grow as digital transformation progresses. Hopefully that explains what the UK BIM framework is. Okay, so if you're in the UK, that's where you go for the standards, and again, they're not freely available. ISO you have to pay for, so there's a link that will take you to BSI's portal to purchase the standards. Crucially, the guidance is also on there. That is free, and also resources that are being developed to help implementation. So a one-stop shop to go in the UK if you're working in the BIM space or want to know a bit more. So this is just a screenshot from the website, and I think it's good to reiterate how it's looking now. So obviously BIM was always about design, build and operate. It was always about the capital delivery phase and the operational phase. But as you click around the website, those 4 segments will link you to any standards that are applicable for that stage. So design, build, and again, it allows for this emergence of new standards as we look towards platform design and MMC and all of those really good things that we're industry's driving at the moment. On the operate side, that's very much starting to link with the future digital twin agenda. So, smart asset management, starting to use real-time information to help improve the operation of our social and economic infrastructure. And the integrate piece, I think, again, is very much allowing for that integration with the work that CDBB is specifically focusing on, which is the national digital twin and putting the citizen at the heart and the future state. So it's a framework that can grow and mature with industry. So I think I've already said, the BIM provides the critical foundations of digital transformation. So that, it was always about that, and it's very much about that still today. So we're trying to slowly drive some automation, and as we're moving more and more digital. So we're moving from analog to digital, but we need to do that in a scalable way, and we need to do it to standardized processes that are repeatable and checkable, and to drive efficiency fundamentally. So I just want to touch on this, and again, it's not an area of comfort for me, but again, it's the digital twin is the buzzword of the year, isn't it? So, this future state, and I think this slide articulates it quite well. A digital built Britain, ecosystem of connected digital twins. So, and if you think about it, if there's the physical asset, real-time information is connected to its digital twin, so you can, your real-time information monitoring the performance that then allows, whether they're interventions manually or automatically, to really drive and help improve that asset, and actually then signal it and connect it to anything dependent on it. So really starting to build an ecosystem across the UK. That's not why we're here and why we exist, but we are very much connected in, and there's a mutual working relationship between what we're trying to do on the ground here today in industry and what's coming ahead. So the guidance to the UK BIM framework. So again, this is on the website, and I'm just going to touch on this. So this started actually, and I think when BSI, I did have a look through their slides earlier, and Gary or Rob will touch on it. The group involved in this started when the PD Part 0 to 19650, so the transition guidance, was being reviewed and formed, which is the mapping from, if you're used to the UK 1192 standards, these are the differences, and this is the mapping to 19650. So this group started to help lean into that, and then it was decided, we do need to have emerging guidance as more of these standards come out. So it's got to quite a wide group with many people leaning in from different companies and roles and profiles. So a really fantastic collaborative group working on this guidance at the moment. And there's more organisations than that involved now. That's just an indication. So hopefully some of you may have seen some of the guidance recently that's been published. Let's move on a slide. So there's two parts at the moment. So part one, which is against the concepts and principles of 19650, which is that was the first to come out back in July 2019, and that's been static since. I think we may go back and do a bit of an update to that. But the one I really want to signpost you to is the part two, process and project delivery, which is the guidance against each clause of 19650 part two. We're now on, and I don't know if that's a black blob to you, that should have said edition 4. Edition 4 was released last week, I think, or the week before. We're going for quarterly updates. So it's grown to quite a big resource now. So it's currently a PDF that you can download on a website, but it's, I think, getting on for 200 pages now. So we are looking at, again with CDBB, moving the guidance to more of an online resource that can be filtered, and so that's in the background, but there's some really good stuff in there. So in terms of the content we're covering in these releases, so you can see down the side there, Q1 in Jan, there was a piece on BIM execution plan and information requirements generally. The release that's just come, I mentioned last week, edition 4, is a really good piece on exchange information requirements, guidance on how that should be formed, some of the things to think about and consider, and some best practice. A piece on open data and building smart, information delivery planning, and this level of information need framework. So there's some really good content in there, and we touch on all the other clauses as well. It's just there's hot topics, and we go into more detail on each release. Q3 this year, so I think we're looking at a July release, or maybe September or August. Information management function, I'm leaning into that one. BIM execution plan, a bit more detail, the second iteration of that. And I think they're the two main topics for the Q3, and then we'll be looking at further topics for the end of the year in Q4. And I just want to say actually on that, so again, we're always looking for people to get involved in this. We've got a fair size of authors authoring the guidance, but it's much wider than that as well. We've got focus groups who work with the authors, review and feedback, because again, it's so important that we get this guidance to actually work for industry practically, and the more people that can lean into it and feed into it and give us feedback, the better it will be. So really encourage everyone to go and have a look at that. So there's the link to the UK BIM Framework website, and yeah, please go on there, have a look, and that should signpost you to the information you need. On that note, I shall now thank you for your time and hand over to BSI.
Thank you very much indeed, Andy. So my name's Rob Hine. I'm the Head of Trade and Partnerships at BSI. And I'd just like to start off before we delve into the wonderful world of standards and hand over to my colleague Gary. I'd just like to give a quick overview of BSI as an organisation. There are lots of misconceptions about who we are and what we do, so I'd like to take these opportunities just to put some clarity in there if possible. So we operate under the BSI group, of which there are certain business units. On the left-hand side of the screen there, you can see the sort of lovely green shaded parts of the business which fall within our national standards body section. Within the national standards body, they're responsible for facilitating the development of standards. We operate around, at the moment, currently we've got about 1,200 committees operating to develop standards for specific industry sectors, and also some generic standards as well. What we effectively do is we facilitate the development of these standards by gathering together industry stakeholders under professional organisations to help create the content for the standards, which we then publish. Interestingly, at the moment, we're working of the standards that we're currently facilitating. Only about 5% of them are national standards, so the rest would fall into the category of European and international standards. On the right-hand side there, we have two light blue sections which fall under BSI Assurance, where we help organisations to take the standards that we publish and implement them as efficiently and effectively as possible to get the most out of them. And then on the far right there, we have this other ring fence section called professional services. So basically, the functionality of the national standards body on the green side there is ring fenced from the other sections of the business, so that we can't, as an organisation, benefit commercially from the work that they do. It's wholly independent, and it's there to provide the service for industry. We operate under something called Royal Charter. There's about 900 organisations currently in the UK who operate under this umbrella. Some are universities, some are charities. The only one I can remember when I do presentations is the League of Indigent Scottish Gentlewomen. I don't actually know what they do, but they operate under Royal Charter as well. But the great thing about that is it enables us to be wholly independent. So we don't have shareholders, and that enables us also to keep a very high levels of integrity, which are necessary for the services that we provide, and also allows us to have a certain amount of innovation. So we're non-profit distributing as an organisation. Any profit that we do make, we put back into the organisation to help develop better and innovative solutions for industry. So the taking away of the constraints of having shareholders does give us a huge amount of flexibility there, and enables us to be very, very strong in ensuring that we have that independence. And also impartiality, of course. We are very much a global organisation. So we changed our name from British Standards Institution to BSI a number of years ago to more accurately reflect our global portfolio, global footprint, with offices in over 50 countries now, and clients in 90 countries, operating very much globally with central governance. The services that we generally provide fall into the categories of consulting, training, certification, auditing, software, and knowledge and standards, again, within those categories of ring fencing. So clearly, as a certification body and a national standards body, we have to put ring fencing up around certain aspects of the business. Any consulting that we do as an organisation is highly ring fenced from anything we do as a certification body, and similarly around the standard side of the organisation. And this ability to free ourselves from shareholders and operate with independence and develop innovation enables us to look at emerging trends like sustainability, supply chain management, and obviously digital transformation, to ensure that we're working very closely and collaboratively with industry to develop new and better solutions to support their aspirations. So I'm going to hand over now to my colleague Gary, who's going to talk around the standards landscape and digital transformation in a bit more detail.
Thanks, Rob. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Yes, my name is Gary Patterson. So I work in the assurance part of the BSI business, and I manage all of BSI's BIM certification schemes. So that involves things like determining the rules of the scheme, ensuring competency of our assessors when assessing against the scheme, and as part of that, I also do assessments myself. And so I've seen BIM implemented, obviously extensively in the UK, but also globally as well. So that's kind of my background. And what I'm going to talk about today is give a kind of a cursory, hopefully a good introduction to the ISO 19650 standards, the two that are published at the moment, and hopefully at a level that I'm assuming most of you have kind of at least an introductory level knowledge of BIM already, but I'll try and give some kind of detail of that will kind of apply to all experiences. So to set the framework, I thought I'd give kind of a context of the standards as it was, and then I'll move to as we are now. So as you know, up until quite recently, the BIM has been defined by the series of 1192 standards. And we see here my simplified asset life cycle going from brief design to construction, in use, and then decommissioning. So as you know, the PAS 1192-2, or we'll just call it PAS2, defines BIM for the design and construction phase. I'm just trying to move my cursor. Sorry, guys. Can I have control, please? Sorry, guys.
You should have control at the moment. Can you try again?
I'm.
There you go. It's moving forward.
There we go. Still trying to click forward. Okay, I think it's just a big delay here going on. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, so if jumped ahead here, so we have the PAS Part 2, which defines design and construction. We have the PAS 1192-3 that defines the asset management phase of the asset lifecycle. We have the BS 1192, which defines the processes for managing information through a common data environment. BS 1192-4, which defines COBE, so that's a system of or a schema for the transfer of information on maintainable assets. We have PAS 1192-5 that defines this how you manage this information related to security within BIM. And lastly, we have, if it comes up, PAS 1192-6, which defines health and safety. There we go. So that's where we have been up until quite recently. So in December 2018, we saw the publication of ISO 19650-1 and -2 respectively, and these have effectively replaced the counterparts in the 1192 standard suite. So what that means is BS 1192 and PAS Part 2 have now been technically withdrawn. So what that means is they're no longer actively maintained. They no longer go through the normal update process that all standards have to go through. So that means the ISO Parts 1 and Parts 2 are the live standards that that we're using at the moment. And I mean, the fact that they're going to ISOs, I mean, this is great news. So we've had, even though all the 1192 standards were developed and published in the UK, we've seen as a certification body their use across the entire globe. So they have up until recently been the best standards for defining BIM. Okay, they're not perfect, but they were still the best standards available. And then what we'll see is that the ISOs that have been published clearly have a lot of similarities between these 1192 standards. So this is good news. For those of you that are already familiar with the 1192 standards, there is a PD 19650-0 transition guidance, which I'll talk about slightly later. And this gives you additional support for migrating a system from an 1192 compliant system to an ISO compliant system. So what we're trying to do is give you as much support in making that transition to the ISO as possible. And the good news of internationalization of BIM doesn't stop there. So we'll see the publication of ISO Part 3 and Part 5, which defines asset management and security respectively, sometime this year. And hopefully maybe sometime the following year, the publication of ISO 19650-4 on the transfer of information. So this is really good news that we're creating kind of a common international approach to BIM that not just the UK can follow, but companies globally. And this is really important. If you're part of a company that operates outside of the UK, this kind of gives a common framework for your whole business to use. Move this forward. Oh, sorry guys. There we go. I think I finally got can manage the arrow buttons now. Okay, so what's different and what's new about the 19650 standards compared to the 1192 standards? So if you're already familiar with the 1192 standards, we see that there is a modified structure. There's some new and amended terms, which we'll go into shortly. There's some new requirements. So there's not that many new requirements, but there are some new requirements. There's some clarifications on existing requirements. So some of the issues we had with the BS 1192 and PAS Part 2 was some of the clauses could be interpreted slightly ambiguously. So hopefully there's some kind of firms up some of these requirements that already exist. It's written from the viewpoint of the entire life cycle. So one of the difficulties of implementing BIM is that in order for BIM to be successfully implemented and get the maximum benefit, you really need to see the asset life cycle as a whole, rather than the design phase, the construction phase, and the asset management phase. To really embrace this start with the end in mind principle, you really need to look at it as kind of within its entirety. So the new ISO standards have been written with that in mind. One of the things that it gives, the ISOs give, is kind of an increased flexibility in how the standards should be implemented. So for example, within the ISO parts 2, it will have each clause will ask for a particular requirement, but then as a kind of a sub part of that clause, it will state, in doing the above, the organisation shall consider, and then it gives kind of a list of things that the organisation needs to consider to implement that clause. So what it's saying is that in order to meet that particular clause, you can apply BIM in a way that's proportional and relevant to the project that you're working on. It allows for some regional differences. Okay, we're no longer it's no longer UK centric, because there were some UK focused clauses within the PAS, and mainly so, and it also captured lessons learned from the original 1192 standards were published some years ago now, and we've all moved on from there. So there's some key differences on what we're looking at. So in terms of what is actually in the contents of the two standards, so ISO parts 1, this defines the framework of applying to BIM. It's applicable across the whole life cycle of the asset, and from a standards point of view, it's full of should clauses. And what a should clause is, it's an advisory clause, so it describes best practice. And ISO part 1 describes these core principles, such as the concept of the common data environment, of working collaboratively. So this is all defined within ISO part 1. Within ISO 19650-2, this then builds on that framework defined in part 1 and defines the specific processes and outputs that should be followed when applying BIM to the design and construction phase. And notably, this standard is full of the shall clauses. So these are prescriptive clauses that if you're going to follow the standard, these are clauses that you need to follow when applying BIM to the design and construction phase. Okay, move on. One of the things that's been considered when writing the ISO standards is the need to work in conjunction with already established system standards. So standards that I'm sure most of you already know and love, like ISO 9001, 55001, 27001, etc. So what we see is that where the system standard defines the core principles. So for example, if we take 27001, that's a hot standard at the moment in standards world. This defines security. ISO 27001 will define the general security requirements of how your organization should be run. Part 5, ISO, so PAS 1192-5, then gives specific, defines how security information should be managed using the specific processes defined within BIM. And the ISO 19650-2 emphasizes this characteristic even more so. So there's a real strong emphasis on things like plan, do, check, act, learning from your experiences. So what we see is there's a real connection between these system standards and our BIM standards. Okay. So one of the things that's being produced is a guidance document, PD 19650-0. This is a really useful guidance, particularly for those of you that have are already familiar with 1192. And this gives you an overview of all the changes that have been made. It gives a clause-by-clause mapping. It goes through all the terminology changes, and it gives some good transition guidance related to when moving from BS 1192 to 19650-2. That's great. So let's moving on. So I don't know whose cursor that is that's floating around. I don't know if you can see that. Let's move on. One additional resource, and you'll notice my versions are probably even more out of date than Andy's were, is these are guidance documents that Andy Bootle has talked about during his last presentation. Okay, moving on. So one of the core lessons learned from 1192-2 was the need to have better engagement with clients. So basically, we need more properly specified BIM projects, and there needs to be real clarity on the specific information that's needed from a production and management point of view from the clients, and there needs to be more appreciation from a client point of view of the benefits that BIM can afford, and this will embrace the starting with the end in mind principle, in that if clients are specifying BIM and clients are specifying BIM correctly and are making that a mandatory requirement for a particular project, then we're essentially going to have more BIM projects that are being delivered at a more complete and mature level. So we have seen, I mean, my involvement in BIM started in 2014, and we have seen a lot of improvement since then, but there's definitely still a lot to go, a lot further to go. But ISO 19650-2 helps continue this trend of putting more and more emphasis on what the client is expected to do. So the client really needs to be engaged in BIM projects from the start, and it does that by essentially giving specific clauses that a client needs to follow. So there's a whole host of activities that the client needs to do, and that is not just the production of the EIR, as we saw in the previous standard. So what we see here is kind of more emphasis on client engagement, and one of the strengths of the standard is that the client can actually delegate some of these responsibilities. So they can delegate responsibilities, they can delegate outputs, they can delegate specific management functions, and there's actually a formal mechanism for doing this through an annex within the standard, which I'll talk about shortly. So if I move on to the next slide. Okay, one of the new changes to the ISO is some modifications and introductions of new terms. So you'll be aware or familiar with all the new jargon that BIM has brought about. So broadly speaking, 19650 maintains most of this jargon, but there are some changes. So for example, the contract is now called appointment. EIR, which was employees information requirements, is now exchange information requirements. Level of definition, which defined the level of graphical and non-graphical information needed, is now collectively known as level of information need. Plain language questions, which is the information a client would need to make informed decisions at a particular milestone, is now called project information requirements. So there's some of the changes, but there's also some new terminology, and these mainly relate to some new outputs the standard asks for, and that will be the subject of some slides below. For example, the mobilisation plan, the information delivery risk assessment. So I'll go into those in slightly more detail in the coming slides. So what else has changed is the slight modification on how we're defining the key stakeholders within that are involved in BIM. So I've been using client this whole presentation, but if we're gonna convert to ISO language, we should be using the term appointing party. So you see here in the diagram, so for a particular project, there'll be typically a single appointing party or client. They'll directly appoint a lead supplier, or we call it tier 1, but the standard calls that a lead appointed party. And then their respective subcontractors will be known as appointed parties. So they're the 3 main categories of stakeholders we have in BIM, and then you can group them collectively as a project team, and then you can see the delivery team, which is defined as the lead appointed party and appointed party together, and then the task team, which will be groups of appointed parties. So you see we just have some new terminology that we have to be aware of, and how that relates to the terminology we're used to. Moving on. So one of the things you may or may not be relieved to know, hopefully relieved, is that the core outputs of the PAS Part 2 remain the same. So we're still looking at EIRs, at project information models, at BIM execution plans, EIRs. So all the outputs and processes that you should be familiar with against the 1192 standards remain in the ISO, which is good if you're kind of used to those and they're working for you in your business. One of the brand new requirements of the ISO 19650-2 is the production of a mobilisation plan. This is developed by the lead appointed party, so that's basically the lead supplier, and this is a activity and output that ensures that you and your delivery team can produce the information, manage the information as per the project specific requirements. So, for example, one of the things you might do is testing of information between respective parties, ensuring there's no skill gaps for effective delivery of the project, and ensuring interoperability between different parts of your project accommodator environments. So these are all things that need to be captured in the mobilisation plan. The idea being that you're making sure that everything's in place before you actually start the main project delivery. Another brand new requirement that's asked for within the ISO is the production of what's called an information delivery risk assessment. Now, there may be risks associated with non-timely delivery of information within a project, where you essentially an organisation is not meeting the exact requirements as defined by the EIR or the BEP, and the risks associated with this need to be captured within the information delivery risk assessment, which is again developed by a tier 1 organisation a lead appointed party organisation. So this captures the risk associated with that, and again is part of your kind of due diligence, ensuring that that if there is a threat to kind of hold up the product significantly from a particular deliverable, that you're managing that accordingly. Okay, and then the last one I'm going to talk about is actually Annex A, which is the information function responsibility matrix. So this is really good. So I think one of the improvements made in the ISO is this gives much greater clarity on information functions or roles and responsibilities when delivering projects, and this is captured within the Annex A, and what this is a clause by clause mapping of which party within the project will be responsible for the delivery and management of that particular clause. So this can be produced to give the project team real clarity on who's delivering what, and hopefully it'll be a contractual deliverable. So everyone knows within a project team what they're responsible for, and so that they can deliver that efficiently. Okay. One of the things that has been published, so there are actually two versions of ISO 19650, parts 1 and parts 2 available. So the ISO version was published in December 2018, but we then saw the publication of the BSEN ISO version of the two standards in January of 2019. And the difference between these two standards is the BSEN version of the standard contains a UK National Forward and UK National Annex. Now, in general, what we when moving from the PAS standards to the ISO, when you're developing any ISO certificate standard, you need to have international consensus of basically all of its contents, and in doing so, you naturally have a slight attrition of some of the more national specific requirements, or some of the real detailed requirements. So what we've seen is in the ISO, there's a lot of clauses that are slightly relaxed compared to the respective clauses in the PAS. So what the function of a national annex is, this can be used in conjunction with the standard, and it can add any national specific clauses that will be specific to your nation. And what we've seen in the UK is, we've done all this hard work in for example, the naming convention. A lot of companies have gone through all the work and expense to really embed the BS 1192 naming convention within their processes, and then now the ISO standard then asks for has a more relaxed approach to naming convention, where you have to have a naming convention, but it doesn't have to be the specific naming convention as per BS 1192. So what the UK National Annex does, it brings back that requirement of the specific naming convention that we've all been using. Now, it is a informative national annex, which means it's not a mandatory requirement. But what that means is you don't have to apply all of its clauses on every project to be compliant to the standard, but you would need to be able to what we would like to see at least, is the UK National Annex being specified through the EIR by your clients, and then that can be used. Oh, I think someone's using the screen. Okay, so you'll see some of the things that we've included in the National Annex, are things like the specific naming convention that we're all used to, some of the specific status codes and revision codes that we've been used to, and reference to COBE as well, which is defined in BS 1192-4. So one of the things, this hopefully it doesn't scare you too much, but this is my visualization of the ISO 19650-2 standard. And the purpose of this diagram is not to go into the detail, but just to kind of bring out, from my point of view, what the additional requirements are from the ISO versus the PAS. So we see those that are in the blue box are the additional requirements as we see it. The rest have common features with the PAS. So again, I just want to put this here to reiterate the commonality between the PAS and the ISO. And in just the last couple of slides, thought it might be useful from our perspective to give some sort of insight on how we've seen BIM adoption globally. So here we see kind of a general heat map of BIM adoption. Of course, in any given country, there's going to be specific organisations that are doing really well from a BIM point of view and are thought leading. But this is kind of a general snapshot of where we are globally. And you'll all be familiar with the UK BIM Level 2 mandate that came into effect. but other countries are doing similar mandates and conditions of contract themselves. So, for example, in Dubai, if you are working on a project over a certain threshold height or over a certain threshold area, it needs to be done using BIM. In Italy, for example, they're having a phased approach where in 2019, any public project above a certain value had to be delivered using BIM, and then each year from now until 2025, they're going to lower that threshold, so BIM becomes more and more common. In Germany, all federal transport infrastructure projects are going to be using BIM. So what we see here is what we're seeing is governments are hopefully catching on to the benefits they can realize with BIM, and are therefore producing their own stimuli to make BIM business as usual in their respective countries. From a certification point of view, we saw, I mean, we now have a huge spread of certified organizations, but initially we saw the main, when BIM first came into effect, it tended to be the lead contractors that were spearheading BIM adoption, then closely followed by the lead designers, and then from there we've seen the general supply chain starting to this is from a certification point of view, starting to adopt BIM certification. And the last frontier that we're still supporting and working on is client appreciation of BIM, and then asset owners as well. And we still see, we're not talking about PAS Part 3 at the moment, but that's still not well represented compared to the design and construction sector. And then from countries we're working with, so during the PAS, you see on the left here, we had certified companies, within all these respective countries. With the publication of the ISO, we've seen interest from a whole load of new countries, and further interest from the countries on the left. So, for example, the USA, Turkey, Philippines, Malaysia. So the ISO has been a really good and important, and it's been important for us. And what we're seeing as well is that organizations are increasingly seeing the benefits of BIM, where they're not even waiting for their clients to specify BIM, but they're delivering BIM as business as usual, irrespective of whether they've been asked for BIM, because they see the benefit in delivering against it. So that's me. I'm going to hand back to Rob. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Gary. So I've been given a really good overview of the standards landscape there. I just wanted to talk a little bit from our perspective of how we see BIM adoption more at a local level. And just before the lockdown, I was doing the BIM circuit, and I think the presentation I was doing was something like, where are you on your BIM journey? Which is a really simple question, which is not necessarily as simple to answer. This slide here is a visual representation of how we feel our clients should be mapping out their BIM journey, and it starts really from a very simple perspective of get hold of a copy of the standards and read them, which is a really good starting point for anybody on a journey of implementation like this. So, as Andy said, the resources are there for you, particularly from the UK BIM Framework, which is a great repository of information. So I encourage everybody to go there. And then following the map there, it's really after you've had a chance to read and digest the standards, it's an educational process. And while I was doing my external presentations, I would start by saying, there are things that you know about BIM, there are things that you don't know about BIM, and unfortunately there are probably things that you don't know about BIM. So this is really just a plea to go out there and find that information. The very fact that you have registered for today's event shows that you're on the right course. Really, when I'm giving these types of presentations, it's the people that don't come to these events that I really need to be reaching out to. So find out as much as you can. If you do that through consultation or through training, whatever method you decide, then whatever works for you and your organization. And then the latter part of the curve would be to look at the possibility of third-party assurance through a gap analysis process, and then if you feel it's right for you as an organization, on certification. Sometimes get asked the question in BSI, what's the point of certification? And really, put in its simplest terms, it's so that you can demonstrate to your stakeholders that you have BIM capability. It's the simplest and most effective way of doing that, to get a third-party organization to evaluate the implementation of these standards and to help you through that process of implementation, and then gaining a simple mark or a certification which demonstrates that clearly to people that you need to demonstrate it to. We ran some focus groups at the latter part of last year to try and gauge an industry where they felt they were with BIM adoption. And this is a condensed version of the feedback that we received. I don't think there's anything in here that would specifically come as a surprise to any of you. The key points there being, confidence in the data, trust issues, getting the right people on the project to deliver, expertise, and again, going through the process of education. Client engagement, as Gary said, has been slow, and that's primarily due to the fact that the engagement wasn't necessarily focused at client level, and we're taking, along with everybody else, including the UK BIM Alliance, an approach now to engage with clients to ensure that they understand what it is that they should be asking for. Procurement, sometimes a disconnect between what's happening at the top of an organization and in the procurement departments. Again, an educational issue. Language has always been challenging with BIM. It's one of the more acronym ladled processes that I've been involved in my 30 years at BSI. But when you condense it all down, as Andy did at the start, into what BIM actually is, then don't let the terminology and the language be an issue for you. And then clearly, it needs to be a top-down approach with mandates coming from the C-suite in all organisations to get the buy-in that's needed for proper implementation. There is a lot of support out there. A lot of organisations are creating support information. The UK BIM Framework portal is an excellent starting point. We've created some tools which I'll show you very briefly. ACOM, they've created some tools, so go out there and see what is available. There's a lot of great resource that will help you on your BIM journey. This is just a maturity tool that we developed so organizations can effectively self-assess. If they fill this in and send it back to us, we can get in contact with them and let them know where we feel that they are on the journey and what their next steps should be, in our opinion. And then we created in conjunction with the industry, a report which also has a self-assessment questionnaire section within it. And again, without wishing to labour the point, the UK BIM Framework is an excellent starting point for the information that you need, and points you in the right direction for other information that is available. If any of you would like to know more about the services that BSI provide and the Kite Mark certification, my email address is on the last slide of this deck, and I'll be happy to field any questions or and provide any information that you might need on that subject or any other subject in relation to the topics covered today. So on that note, I will hand back to Alistair.
Okay, thanks very much for that. Really appreciate that. It's been really good. I'm just going to move us forward a slide.
Sorry, one more.
So yeah, we're going to move into the Q&A section here, and I would be delighted to receive questions for our presenters. We haven't got any questions in the sidebar at the moment, which I'm surprised about. So I'm going to
Alistair, we have a few.
Oh, do
I
we
just
have?
I forgot to make you organizer. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay,
Um,
fine.
do you want me to ask them and then we
Sure.
decide who answers them? So in easy, well, I think it's easy. When or will there be an update to the CIC BIM Protocol 2nd edition to align with ISO 19650? So who wants to take that one?
Andy, are you able to answer that one?
Yeah, and probably Pam can answer that as better than I can. But very soon, the information protocol, which is the redrafted version, aligned to 19650, is literally in the throes of final checking, and then it's being published. I think, Pam, was it the next end of the month we're expecting it to be?
That's
launched?
the plan, to have it ready by the end of the month. Okay.
So that, keep your eyes peeled for that.
Thank you. Is it likely that PAS 1192 Part 6 will become an ISO 19650? It's a question, Rob, Gary.
To my knowledge, Part 6 isn't currently being written as an ISO. I'm unaware of any plans for it to become an ISO, but I never say never. We haven't seen. I mean, it is the newest of the PAS standards, but I have to admit, from our point of view, the adoption of the PAS Part 6 hasn't been as strong as we would ideally hope for. I don't know if that has any influence on whether it's moving to an ISO or not. But sorry, I can't answer that conclusively. All I can say is that to my knowledge, there's no plans for that to become an ISO at the moment.
Thank you, Gary.
We can find out definitively on that one, and we'll post the information back to you so that you can share with the attendees.
Thank you. Okay, well, questions are flying in now. So more of a suggestion rather than a question. It would be beneficial to mandate the role of a BIM coordinator responsible for spatial coordination, class detection, model federation, etc. There's still a lot of fundamental misconceptions throughout the industry incorrectly allocating these responsibilities to the information manager. So there's more of a comment than anything else. That was to share with the wider group.
I think I'd just like to quickly respond to that if I could. Yeah. Yeah. So and yeah, I recognise the need as well, but I think when Gary touched on the information management function, which is part of a requirement on 19, so all the clauses under the process delivery part 2, that function needs to be assigned. Where I think that will help, and again, putting my day job hat on as sitting as a contractor, trying to get project teams to carry out tasks relating to things like you've just said, that same approach can help that in your project team organization. So yes, that annex that Gary showed, it provides a racky on each clause, but me as a contractor, I'd want to then under each clause where we're responsible for activities, I'd have a list of subtasks and trying to get design manager over there, you need to be driving coordination reviews and clash detection. That's you're owning that piece. Planner, you're doing that. So I think that scenario should be helped by the ISO and embedding it properly.
Okay, thank you. How have BIM government standards influenced adoption in the UK? What is the BIM design penetration like in the UK, and key benefits of and challenges to adoption? Maybe that one's for you, Rob.
It's quite a wide-ranging question.
Sorry.
The mandate certainly was a key driver through implementation of PAS 91, but as we see in many cases where mandates come down from central government or from the European Commission, it takes a little while for the messages to kind of sink home, and there's a lot of when these things happen, there's a lot of looking at what your competitors are doing and taking a look to see what's happening in the landscape before anyone's willing to commit. So the most notable I ever saw was with the implementation of CE marking. And we as a nation sailed past the deadline blissfully without actually implementing on any real scale, and then we're basically in a situation of playing catch up. So we see rather unexpectedly a similar situation with BIM. The mandate has certainly helped to strengthen the message, but in my personal opinion, it wasn't an instant turning on of the switch. So that's kind of my opinion. I don't know if Gary, you have a different perspective on it.
Sorry, Rob, I was just going to say the focus group insights slide that you guys went through, I think was really useful in actually answering some of that. And I think there's sort of from that, there's kind of discussion topics within that about sort of implementation and kind of change management and where people are finding that there's barriers against that or particular drivers within that. So I think from a kind of region point of view, I think it would be useful for sort of Alistair and I to take away some of the kind of focus group insights that you had there and sort of have those as particular topics that we could look at more deeply about how the region sort of feels about those and where people are and some kind of case studies around them maybe.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent idea, and we'd be delighted to do that, obviously, and to help to anything that we can help to do to drive adoption for BIM. We'd be more than happy to do, and we can share the whole of that focus group data with you in a bit more detail.
Okay.
I honestly, Pam, I forgot the other part of the question.
No, not to worry. There's absolutely lots coming in. Let me get, somebody's asked question and opinions of the panel. So this is for all of you around BIM education. There are gaps between trainees and students coming into the industry. Support at educational institutions need assistance as well. What are your thoughts? Access to learning materials, ISOs and standards for students would be useful, as well as any additional support in further and higher education supporting apprenticeships. So what are your thoughts around BIM education and the gaps? Who wants to go first?
I'll start, Gary here. So working for BSI and being very standards focused, the first thing I learned when starting to do assessments is the kind of the disconnect between the kind of the proverbial perfect BIM that's defined in the standards versus how it's actually applied in practice and the difficulties of its application, especially in the PAS days or 1192-2 days. So yeah, there is a disconnect. So it's I'm not a BIM practitioner like someone like Andy, but wherever we do, there needs to be an appreciation of the kind of the theoretical BIM versus the practical BIM, and the more we can kind of marry them or bring those two together, so there's not such a gulf between the two, the better.
Thank you.
I'd just like to kind of, I was just going to add to that actually, that I think there's also there's quite a gulf between what institutions are currently doing, particularly in the kind of higher education sector, about the development and of innovations and say like the Centre for Digital Prototyping, for example, how they're kind of looking at the innovation and the kind of stepping forward of the kind of digital transformation within the UK and wider, and then how that actually relates to day-to-day courses that students are undertaking within the institutions, and then if they're then leaving university and as you was just saying, the then kind of boots on the ground of people about actually undertaking roles within the industry that relate to BIM or digital design. Again, I think there's a need to educate what that actual landscape looks like at the moment, and what those roles are, which kind of relates a little bit back to the roles and responsibilities question that we had just a minute ago. That, again, I don't think there's a huge amount of clarity out there necessarily about who does what within different parts of the industry. And I think certainly if I was a student leaving university, I'd be wanting to know that better. So and I think that's definitely probably missing within institutions at the moment.
Mm. Yeah, I think is the question phrased more at the gap of it, the correct and gap education at syllabus level in terms of school, college, university, or is it or general industry? Do we think? Could you just read it again, Pam?
There are gaps between trainees and students coming into the industry. Support at educational institutions need assistance as well. So it's further and higher education.
Yeah, and I think there's a big acknowledgement of that, and there's no, I don't know what the answer is. I mean, you've got initiatives like Alison Watson, haven't you, with Class of Your Own, who put a really good sort of course and teachers into at a sort of sixth form level, I believe. But yeah, there's it needs the syllabus would need driving, wouldn't it, and adopting. I mean, we're doing plenty of stuff industry side, but yeah, for students coming through, it's a little different. Albeit there's apprenticeship schemes that more and more companies are doing. Certainly, Kira, one of them, which sort of get people at a young age and apprenticeship level to help do that, but it doesn't answer the critical mass probably.
I have to say, from my perspective, I've never been to a BIM event where I haven't been engaged by at least one of the local universities. So there seems to be an appetite from the universities to engage with the process and to educate students. But I don't have visibility of what's actually happening beyond that sort of top level engagement.
Okay, thank you. A couple of technical ones now coming. Although, regarding the mobilisation plan, if the lead appointed party is an architect at REBA stage 3, are they best to create the mobilisation plan, and how does this conflict if you have an information manager and this is not the architect?
I think I can take that one, because that's the very thing I'm scratching and deliberating over at the moment when trying to write the guidance to the information management functions. It's a very good question. The way the standards at an appointment level, if you're a lead appointed party, then one of the resources you need to produce is a mobilisation plan. But like you've said, when you're effectively working alongside other lead appointed parties, it doesn't necessarily make sense for each one to produce. It needs to be a coordinated resource. So I think don't read the standard quite as rigidly as it may appear, and I'm going to say hopefully look at the guidance once it's the next edition's released, because those kind of scenarios is exactly what we're trying to help clarify practically.
Okay.
So I'm not going to. I can't give an exact answer to that at the moment, but it will be coming.
You may be able to add to this one, Andy. So just going back on the education conversation, I've had a comment coming in saying that the professional institutions need to help academia to define how to deliver the syllabus digitally, and it's a suggestion that it may be one for the affiliates program.
That's a good one, and we should certainly take that as something to discuss and look at. Absolutely.
Okay, from BS 1192 to ISO 19650, the codes D, etc., for tender issue and costing have been removed. Where do these now lie within the new standard?
They don't. Is there a simple answer to that?
Can we elaborate? Can we?
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. So the D codes are now. So let me just remind myself. Yeah. So you basically got your status codes are either S codes or published A codes, or B. There's no D codes. It was deemed because you're issuing or exchanging information at a particular stage, and in the status code, if it becomes published at A, whatever it is, the number after the A would reflect the stage the information is published at. So it was deemed that the D codes were not actually necessary, and just probably overcomplicated something that didn't need to be as complicated.
Okay, Thank you. Rob, I think you alluded to this earlier, or Gary may have done. Is there a time frame for 19650 Part 3?
So we, as the BSI, we don't have control over publication of international standards. So we're guided by the ISO on that. So we can't give definitive answers on that. We had projected delivery and publication dates for parts 3 and 5 this year, but we don't know. Honestly, I can. No, it's not my place to make a sort of statement on that, but we're hopeful that they will be published this year, but we can't guarantee that. Hugely unhelpful answer, I'm afraid.
Okay. Is there a reference to any classification system identified within the ISO, for instance, uniformat, etc.? I don't know who wants to take that one, the classification systems.
I could. I mean, all I'd say to that is in the national annex, as Gary talks about the UK's classification system, which is Uniclass 2015. So in the UK, using the national annex, it would be Uniclass 2015. If that helps.
Another question: will there be a progression from COBie to a new data standard? Is that one anybody would like to answer?
So the ISO Part 4 is currently being written at the moment. So that will take the place of BS 1190-4. So we don't know any of the proposed changes for that. But one of the things that BIM asks for in general is that you transfer information in a structured way, and COBie or Part 4 was always just an example, a compliant way of doing that. And there were other ways. I mean, I've seen during my assessments, I've seen, especially internationally, many solutions for transferring information that kind of effectively are COBies, but just slightly different. So they're more tailored to the client's CAFM system rather than just the general COBie system. And we still hear a lot of criticism for COBie as well. So hopefully whatever the solution, the ISO solution to that is, will address most of the issues that people have with it.
I'll just add to that as well. It's probably worth, if you haven't seen it, CIH Construction Innovation Hub published the BIM Interoperability Exchange Group report recently, which is open for comment, I think still at the moment.
In there, on Friday.
Yeah, and in there, one of the topics was COBie, which is effectively a model view definition schema of IFC, and there's a work stream that's going to be identified looking at other MVDs, so whether it's COBie or something similar, or something different, which would probably be supported by the framework of that ISO Part 4, I'd imagine. But it's worth having a look at that report and finding it. You can find it on social media.
Yeah, I definitely second that, actually, Andy. I mean, I was looking at that report a couple of days ago, and I mean, it also looks at the standards in the sense of people utilising things like NRM codes, SFG20, and Uniclass, and how they kind of all could combine, or whether they combine, and basically asking for comment on that from people in the industry. So it's definitely worth a look.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to work out which one I should ask next. Is there a terminology system suggested in the ISO for different roles within design teams to be officially recorded in a BEP? For instance, a firm's BIM manager or a client's appointed BIM manager, etc.
So there's my response to that would be there's no project role as BIM manager. That's a job title. But again, going back to the information management function, when you're, if you take that high level clause by clause responsibility, but then once you're worked out in your BIM execution plan and other resources, these are the subtasks that need carrying out under that clause. and this is who's responsible for it, that's where you'd identify that. That certainly would be, I think, the approach when we come to look to produce these resources in business processes in Kier.
Okay.
Hopefully that helps.
So related to that then, I suppose, somebody's asked, what are the contents of the BEP? Who would be responsible for it?
So I'd point you to, I mean, the high level contents is in the clause in ISO Part 2, and the guidance that we've talked about goes into more detail about how, why, who, and what. So I'll just point you at those resources, I think. Yeah, but a lead appointed party would be responsible for producing the BEP along with their potential appointed parties.
Okay, thank you. Where does the UK BIM framework sit in relation to ISO 19650? Are there other regional frameworks that point to the same thing under the ISO?
That's a good question. I mean, sorry, I'm jumping in here. So in the UK, that is the framework where those standards and guidance and any resources sit. What other regions are doing for that approach internationally, I have no idea, quite honestly. BSI might be able to elaborate. I think it's a very UK specific approach, what we're doing.
Yeah, I'm also unaware of any specific national frameworks other than the UK. I know I have heard that some other countries are maybe developing their own national annex, but I'm unaware of national framework.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the only one I've heard of outside of the scope of that fits within BIM for local government anyway, which is the UK construction framework. But I'm sure you guys are aware of them anyway.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Andy, how does the UK BIM Alliance relate with Building Smart?
Yeah, so I think so the UK and Ireland chapter of Building Smart is part of the UK BIM Alliance. It's one of the same. Casey Rutland's the chair of the UK and Ireland chapter. We're very much one organisation. It's almost like another arm of the alliance, effectively, in the UK. They then obviously feed up into Building Smart International and lean into the international effort.
Okay.
Yeah, hopefully that's a high-level answer.
Rob, this may be one for you. Has there been a study done for what scale of projects are adopting BIM in the UK? Do we know if there has been a study done? Does it range from single dwellings through to large developments? So
I don't know the answer to that, but again, it's one that I can take away back to the organisation and find out. Maybe my colleagues from the standard side of the business have been working on that. So I will find out and circulate the answer again.
Okay. Question opinion for everybody. Do you believe there might be development for an ISO Part 1 and or 2 lead auditor or lead implementer course as an additional measure for quality commitment from BSI? I suppose. There you go. So yes, do you believe there might be development for an ISO? They put ISO 1650, so I'm assuming 19650. Part 1 or 2 lead auditor or lead implementer course as an additional measure for quality commitment from BSI. So are you looking at developing a course?
So
Yes.
is this a, sorry, carry on.
Yes, we are. Well, they wouldn't necessarily be lead auditor, and the terminology is kind of up for discussion. So we have courses which will be announced this month, which they won't be in any way sort of mandatory, but they're all kind of stepping stones to embedment and understanding, effectively. So yeah, watch this space. We are imminently going to announce some new training courses.
Okay. comment has come in. Totally support your slides on life cycle costs. IFMA analysis indicates over 85% are incurred in the FM and O&M phase. Yet most discussions read digitalisation seems to be focused on the pre-design to handover phase. Does anyone have any comments on this?
Sorry, Keith. Just from a design architectural point of view, which is part of what my field is, but my role really is about strategic implementation of BIM within our institutions and stuff that we work with as well. And we are finding that there's a lot more appetite now, certainly within the last year or so, for the digitization of estates is what we tend to term it. And that's really looking at the kind of legacy data that people have in-house within the operations and facilities management type areas within their institutions, but and then also looking at sort of integrating that with whatever we're doing, if we are doing new buildings or refurbishments to existing buildings. But that kind of digitization, I think, is something that certainly sort of top-down level is now being understood a lot more, and people are trying to now start looking at the implementation of that kind of digitization of an estate, and of a whole kind of catalogue of their buildings, or however they're kind of managing it. I think that is something that's being developed now really a lot more and understood, and that does kind of link in a lot more with the kind of national digital twin as well. I think that obviously the Centre for Digital Britain are looking at.
Exactly right, Keith. I was going to say the same. I mean, the focus is definitely going that way, stronger as it needs to. And then I think more immediately as well, ISO 9650 Part 3, as Gary mentioned, when that's published later this year, that will help the focus in the shorter term as well and build for that future. So yes is the answer.
If I can add just a little bit, our next session as well, we are looking at a larger kind of client that has a larger estate of buildings. So that is an aim to talk a little bit at the next session, what that looks like for a client and how they can plan for that more strategically. So it'd be great if they can join us for that session as well, and we can hopefully develop that conversation a bit further.
Right, thank you. Is it fair to be changing the naming convention fields, adding new and taking away old? Will version 3 be different again? Where does one start with all the changes?
Is that in relation to the national annex?
I'm assuming so, yes.
Container ID. Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, and like we said, it's open for public consultation at the moment, and actually look at. I'll just take this opportunity. So we're planning. UK BIM Alliance are planning the Great Pam. Remind me what it's called. It's a catchy name.
The Great British National Annex Debate.
There we go. So it's going to be an event you can register for. People working in different roles and disciplines will be able to break into those specific rooms and have a really good debate about what the changes are and and then we'll come back together and that will again go back to help form whatever this latest update of the annex is. And like you say, we don't want to keep changing it. So I think this change was triggered from the fact that due to the publishing of 19650 Part 2 and that national annex, it didn't really get a proper look at when the various elements of BS 1192 2007 were brought across to the annex. It was almost done as okay, we'll just transfer what's already there, simplify it a bit, and this was okay, now's the time to kind of look at it. Is it working? Are there any tweaks that can help improve it? So yeah, I don't think it's not something that's going to be changed with any frequency, but I think this was the opportunity to do a bit of an update and an upgrade to help in the longer term. But do lean into the review and comment process, please.
Can we have a bit of an update on Part 6 and what is the plan to correlate with the new ISO counterpart?
We've already covered that in another question.
Okay, that's fine. Can originator be expanded to 7 digits? Somebody's asked. All right, in the ISO, is lead appointed party a generalized definition of the following PAS 1192 roles? Employer's representative, project delivery manager, project information manager, lead design / constructor.
No, a lead appointed party. So where the ISO talks about parties, that just remember this is an appointment level. So if you're a lead appointed party, you have a direct appointment from the appointing party, the client, effectively. So I think as Gary mentioned, you're a tier 1. That has no within that organisation, whatever that lead appointed party is, you may have people carrying out various roles. They're two subtly different things. So it's
probably worth looking back at Gary's slides on that, actually, because I think it explains it quite well about the actual different teams appointed within that, and then the task team within each of those sections would obviously then have those dedicated roles and responsibilities within it. So probably worth the person asking the question, when we publicise the slides, probably worth just reviewing that again.
Yeah, and again, it's important just to pick up on that. So the where PAS2 identified those roles, information management roles, like project information manager, task information manager, task, that's gone, and that's now the approach is assigning out the information management function to individuals. And that was one of the changes, the lessons learned based on feedback, is that's not really working in practice. So the approach has changed on that. Which I think
Alistair, I've had a number of people ask about slides and recordings. Do you want to provide info on that?
Yeah, so we will be making the slides and the recording available after this session. It'll probably be towards the end of this week. We'll make them available and we'll share them. I think I'm right in saying that the people who are attending this will get a link to the presentation that they can rewatch if they want to.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so there's a question here. Is there going to be training and guidance based upon the legal obligations when using the suite of ISO standard documents as governance in producing asset information lifecycle data, intellectual property rights and CDE data storage when dealing with collaboration between appointed parties? As the completion of the CIC protocol should be adopted for any dispute or contractual agreements. They appreciate that this is a standards presentation, but just wanted a bit more info around the BIM protocol, I suppose, and legal obligations. Not sure if anybody wants to take that one on.
I'll just say that the legal implication of BIM has always been an issue since we've been involved in it. From a standards point of view, we are completely agnostic from the legal side of things. So when we come and do assessments, we basically just don't get involved in that side of BIM for good or bad.
I think it's probably worth saying from our point. Sorry, Andy, I was just going to say we've always based anything in BIM under the assumption that everything is led from the client, and therefore any legal side of ownership, particularly when it comes to the ownership and intellectual property of any modelling that's been done, and any ownership of then modelling that gets handed over post handover. Resides with the client, and therefore if there's any reuse of any of that, then that's their legal obligation to do so.
Yeah, I agree, Keith. Just to add a little nugget to that, the last guidance committee meeting, we did have a little debate on once the updated information protocols launched, should we be producing guidance of it? And I think we decided let's let it launch, because I think there's some like the current one, there is some sort of simple guidance contained within the protocol itself. However, I think we're going to let it go out for publishing, and then based on feedback, there then yeah, if there's a need, then we'll produce guidance against it, implementing it.
Okay, last question. Is there more detail on when, what, who in relation to information needs? So I think they're looking for more information around level of information needs.
So I'll point you to that latest guidance, edition 4, that's been published. Mark C has written a piece on level of information need, quite a high level at the moment. And again, it's a framework approach because there's a SEN standard that hasn't yet been published that will describe level of information need proper. So in the meantime, we need to have, be able to do something to fulfill that from that clause from the ISO, or that resource. So please do download that guidance and go and read. There's quite a good piece that just helps simply explain the approach and how that may be done.
That's it, Alistair.
Okay, thank you very much. That's fantastic. So this is bringing us to an end, and that's a fantastic set of questions. So really appreciate everyone for sending those in. That's really great. I want to say a really big thanks to all of our speakers today. So Andy, Gary, and Rob, thanks very much for your time and your expertise today. That's been really, really great. And I'd like to say a special thank you to Pam for doing a huge amount of organising and help behind the scenes. So thank you very much for that. I'd also like to thank the BIM Alliance more widely, and to BSI as well, because again, behind the scenes, there's been a lot of organisation and support, and that's been really appreciated. That's going to draw us to a close. I'd like to thank everyone for attending today. If you would like to get in touch with any of the speakers today, then the details are on the screen now. So please get in touch either with Keith and I to do with the the UK Alliance South group. So if you've got anything that you'd like to contribute or talk to us about, then please get in touch either directly or through our email address. And Andy and Rob have provided their details as well if you would like to contact them with any sort of further questions or ideas about how you can contribute to their organizations. So I'm going to say thank you again, and just stay safe and have a great day. So thanks very much.
Thank you.